Hello, and welcome to an all new episode of Horror Flix and Chill. I am one of your hosts, Kinte, all the way live from Los Angeles, California. And I'm joined by my wonderful, beautiful, talented co host, Jen. How are you doing, Jen?
Great. Very good. And just, I always feel like when you say, I'm joining you live all the way from sunny California, sunny Los Angeles, I always have to say, I'm joining you live from sunny in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii. I don't know why. It's an odd thing, but somehow I just feel like I need to keep up with the Joneses.
Well, now I need to keep up with you. All right. This is episode 5 of our show, and we haven't been on for a while, but I definitely wanted to come and do this one. Today, we will be reviewing the film The Black Phone, which came out June 24th, 2022. And it's a film I'm very excited about. If you can, Jen, will you read the synopsis?
Absolutely. So, the Black Phone. Let's see. I'm so sorry. Let me start that over again. So, the Black Phone. Finney Shaw is a shy but clever 13-year-old boy who's being held in a soundproof basement by a sadistic, masked killer. When a disconnected phone on the wall starts to ring, he soon discovers that he can hear the voices of the murderer's previous victims. And they are dead set on making sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to Finney.
They're dead set.
They are
Pardon the
dead set.
pun. Yes, pardon the pun. This film is directed by Scott Derrickson. And before we get into Scott Derrickson, it's actually based on a Joe Hill short story. Joe Hill is, of course, the son of Stephen King. And what's so funny is I can understand why he changed his name. One reason is he wanted to kind of get it on, get in on his own, not look like it's nepotism. But also, I think there's a practical reason because his real name would be uh, King, right? Joe King. So his name would be Joking. so so I can
It,
understand possibly why he might want to change that.
it's so unfortunate that parents don't really stop to think about those kinds of things ahead of time, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I know you're very aware of some of his adaptations and stuff, right? And some of his written work, right?
Yeah, in fact, Joe Hill wrote one of my favorite TV series adaptations, Nosferatu, which is
Yes.
all about Christmas land, and it's really spectacular. It's very spectacular. Joe Hill seems to do a really good job on, okay, let's just have a quick chat about this, just real quick.
Okay.
Why is it that so many of Joe Hill's works seem to adapt to TV and movies better than Stephen King's?
Ooh. I don't know. I think it's funny. They're gonna always be they're always going to be compared. But even though the film we're gonna review tonight is very reminiscent of something his father might have made, but I think a
True.
lot of his work is has his own. He has his own style to it. So yeah, and I think maybe he thinks that way more than maybe his father. You know.
I think if you I mean if you decide to read this short story, it's actually quite good.
Yes, I did read.
And so to anyone who's listening, it's definitely worth the read. But it's the writing style of Joe Hill is definitely very different than Stephen King.
Hmm.
You there's a I mean there's too many differences to go into on the podcast, but I think I sort of understand why the adaptations are a little bit easier, and I think it has to do with less specificity. You can say that 10 times fast.
Right.
um because where Stephen King is concerned with the minutia of things, which often just sort of distracts, I think, from the overall sense of the story, Joe Hill has a really interesting layer of, hey, here's what's happening, use your imagination. And I think that this movie actually is a perfect indication of exactly that mindset. So I'm real excited that we're going to be talking about it. Do you think, one other thing that I also think is super exciting about this is Joe Hill writes in epic tropes. And even though Stephen King does write in tropes a bit, his stories aren't quite as trope heavy. And Joe Hill's tropes, they're excellent. And again, when we start talking about what is sequentially and narratively happening in the movie, I will definitely be here with tropes of the day. So,
Well, yes. Um, and I think later on, when we get deeper into the story, we can get into some differences because there are a lot of differences
mhm.
between the short story as well as the actual film. So, all right. So, let's get into Scott Derrickson. Scott Derrickson, who has done quite a bit of good work. He did The Exorcism of Emily Rose in 2005. Have you seen
I
that one?
love that. Yes, I love that movie. That's another one that involves kids that is it's creepy. It's super creepy and it's mood worthy. So that's a good one.
Now, anyone who knows me knows that Sinister is one of my favorite horror films. I love Sinister. That's what got me to want to watch this film is because, and we're gonna have to review it on the show. I feel like Sinister is so underrated,
Mm.
and I like the sequel as well. I know some people didn't like the sequel. I did enjoy the sequel as well, even though he didn't direct it, but he did write it. Mr. Boogie or Bagul,
Bagul.
great
I love Bagul.
character. Oh
Yeah.
man. And I hated I found out that they weren't gonna do a third one, which sucked. Which sucks because I really wanted to see where they were gonna go. So if y'all listening out there, Jason Blum and Scott Derrickson, give me I want part three of Sinister, okay? And then he also directed 2016's Doctor Strange, a Marvel film that was excellent. Did you enjoy Doctor Strange?
I really liked the original Doctor Strange, the one from 2016. The last
Yeah, the one
one,
that he did.
yeah, he also did 2022.
No, he didn't.
Oh, are you
No,
sure?
that was Sam Raimi.
Didn't he get writing credits? Didn't
No, okay, so I was gonna go into this, but I guess we can go into it now. He actually left, uh, the creative differences. And
Oh,
so
okay,
then
that's
he
where I
ended up
heard
doing
that
the Black
from.
Phone because he was actually going to
Okay,
do the Black Phone in 2010. Then he kind of put it off, did Sinister, Sinister 2,
gotcha.
and then he was able to do the movie that he's been wanting to do for a long time. So, but yeah, it was the creative differences. So he I think they gave him a producer's credit, but no,
Okay,
that
okay.
was Sam Raimi did Doctor Strange.
I knew Sam Raimi directed it. I didn't. I thought that Derrickson had writing credits, but
No.
okay. Well, that's good for him because
They might have taken some
2016.
of his concepts because that happens. That happens. So, but no, no, that was one of the issues was he didn't like where they were going with it and whatnot. But
Well,
as far as
2016 Doctor Strange is amazing. It's
it is,
absolutely it's in fact that's one of my more favorite movies to watch. That's Marvel rewatchable, other than Thor Ragnarok.
yes, yeah, I really enjoyed that film quite a bit. And so and Scott Derrickson, to me, he's one of the new faces of horror. Like, I mean, well, he's been around for a while, but I mean, like Jordan Peele, came into there, Mike Flanagan, and what's his name, Ari Aster. I
All right.
really love. I think they're in this like group of people that just do great stuff. James Wan is excellent as well. Um, he does a little more popcorny stuff, but I love their stuff. So I would love to see like a round table with those guys. That'd be pretty awesome. But I really love Scott Derrickson's work and looking forward to it.
Teaming up with Blumhouse seems like that is a match made in heaven.
Yes. And
It just does.
go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it just does. The that particular combination, getting into the Blumhouse wheelhouse, I guess is the way to say it, really feels like a good combination because not only there's some creative things that seem to happen in Blumhouse horror that really don't happen in other horror, both franchises and inside of the production, the umbrella production part. We don't see a lot of these liberties being able to be taken. So, and I have a lot of thoughts later in the show about why I think that this was so successful. And I don't think if it hadn't been Blumhouse, that they would have taken some of these chances. So,
All right, I'm looking forward to that. Now, I want to say this, and then I'm gonna reiterate it after we play the trailer. Is that this is the non-spoiler section of the show, so you can, if you haven't seen the film yet, and you want to kind of get our thoughts, we will not spoil it, but then we are going to have a spoiler section, which we will say it beforehand, and it'll say it on the screen that this is the spoiler section. So you can listen, but some people, they may think that anything is a spoiler. So uh do yourself a favor, check out the film and then come back, but we will try our best to not spoil it in the first part of our podcast, but we will get into spoiler territory at the end. So does that sound good?
sounds great.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the trailer. It's about 2 minutes or whatever. And then I'm going to reiterate about the spoilers one more time, and then we're going to get into the review.
Sounds good.
All right, here we go.
I'll be home in the morning.
Where you going?
I'm staying over at Susie's tonight.
What's new? The flyer.
The papers call him the grabber.
I wish you wouldn't call him that.
You don't actually believe that story, do you? Because he can't hear you, and he doesn't really take kids that safe.
Oh, you goof. Well, isn't that just peachy keen?
You need some help?
You see that?
Yeah.
Would you hand me my hat? Yes, sir. I am a part-time magician.
Are those black balloons in there?
Would you like to see a magic trick?
I have an announcement to make. One of our students, Finney Blake, was abducted.
What if I could help the police find Finney?
Doesn't work. Not since I was a kid.
I'll scream. I'll scratch your face.
This face?
Daddy, I had a dream about it.
What happened in your dream?
He was taken.
By a man with black balloons.
Yes.
We never released those details.
Hello?
Don't hang up.
Who are you?
You know all our names.
You're getting out of here.
Please, please let the dreams be real.
See the wall in front of you? I tore a long cable loose from down there.
There's a combination lock on the inside of the storm door.
What's the combination?
I carved it in the wall. The tree, the door, the gate. I'd never seen it before except in my dreams.
You don't have much time. You're gonna use a weapon. You raise the phone, step back, and swing.
Look what you made me do.
Please hurry.
You remember what I told you?
There's someday I have to stand up for myself.
Someday is today, Finn.
All right, all right, all right. Okay, that's the trailer. I wish we could show the visuals, but I didn't want to get dinged. So hopefully the audio will do what we wanted to do. And once again, this is non-spoiler section of the show. Later, we will get into spoilers and we will let you know. All right. So, first of all, what was your overall thoughts of this film?
Um, uh, okay. So I walked into the film thinking one thing. Um, and I think part of that is the way that the trailer set everything up. And I thought it was going to be a lot more supernatural than it was. Not that there are elements of supernatural going on here, but I really thought that it was going to be like, oh, this is big supernatural. Um, and I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that this is really a story of heroic bravery, and determination, finding yourself. Um, it's the kind of coming of age stuff that's like, this is good. This is really good. So I liked it. Um, I think from an overall point of view, it deserves a lot of credit for sort of jumping into a place in horror that we haven't historically had a lot of movies fill. That this little niche in here is kind of empty. There isn't a lot of it around. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but overall, I did really like it.
Yes, and look, I've been gushing about this film since it came out and I saw it,
He really
and
has. Like every moment that he can. Absolutely. I can vouch for that.
I love this movie quite a bit. I've seen it 3 times now, and like it more and more every time I see it. And so, I hate to even say it's not perfect, but I mean, what is perfect, right? So, but I think it's a terrific film, and I'm looking forward to us breaking it down. So, I think the best probably place to start off with is the characters. So, let's start off with our main character, and this is Finney,
Right?
played by Mason. I think it's Thames or Thames or Thames, because it's spelled like the River Thames, in England, but we'll say Thames until someone corrects us, you know. But let's start off with Finney. Honestly, for me, Finney, the actor Mason, I think he does a terrific job. You really feel for him when he's in danger. You feel for him before the real danger that he's in. I mean, because he's constantly in danger, which I feel like is very interesting when we get really deep into the plot. The fact that brutality is a part of his everyday life. Like
Hmm.
whether it's at home or at school. I mean, poor Finney is just getting it handed to him all the time, and he really doesn't know how to, he's a brain, I would say, doesn't know how to stick up for himself at the start of the film. But I feel like Mason does a great job. What's your take on Finney?
Yeah, I think you're actually right on. I think we see pretty early on that he's into rockets, that in fact him carrying the rocket pen with him is that's a big thing in the movie. He very much feels like an underdog. And there's something very pervasive in this movie with all the characters, where all the characters basically face moments of being bullied or are bullies to others. And it's kind of an interesting aspect to bring into the film, because although usually what we'd see in horror films is the bully or the bullied become uh there's a cutoff point. They snapped, and something intrinsically changes about them. And usually it's not for the good. Usually it's, some kind of very bad thing. Or we see that whoever the serial killer is was bullied, and that's supposed to be sort of the cue for why they behave the way that they do. But with Finn, it's very different. His bullying, I think, ends up putting him in a position of being very he's a soft target, but you really feel an empathetic bond with him, because who among us hasn't felt that sense of, even in the very first scene at the baseball game, he throws perfect 2 pitches, right? And then the 3rd pitch, yeah, Bruce actually gets a piece of it and knocks it out of the park. And it feels like, this is sort of that's the setup for the way that Finney's life is. It's like, yeah, things are great, but they're not really that great. So
Yeah. And remember, Finney's arm is mint.
Finney's arm is mint. Yes.
So when you guys see the film, you'll get that. I really liked his character. I felt like he was definitely very believable, and when he needed to show emotion, I thought he did a great job. And I like his interplay with our villain, the Grabber, which I feel like when we get to the Grabber part, maybe we'll go more deeper into their interplay with each other. But I really liked Finney. Good character. Um,
It's interesting to me
mhm.
that Finney, that they spend so much time in the beginning of the film setting up the fact that Finney cannot or does not want to create either conflict or stand up for himself. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean just literally can't do it. He can't seem to find the confrontation within him to stand up to other people, and it is one of the things that I think makes him also uh, live a lot longer than some of the other kids because of some stuff that's gonna we'll hear about later. But it sort of works for him in the premise of the movie that he isn't the kid that fights back, that he isn't the kid with a lot of confidence. And we see that in Bruce, and we see that in Vance, and we see that in a lot of the other characters. Finney doesn't have that. He just doesn't. So, and it's strange because that character flaw ends up being actually a strength that narratively he gets to use.
Right. Right. Sorry about my phone going off. So unprofessional. All right. So let's talk about our next character, and that is Gwen,
Gwen.
Finney's
Yeah.
sister, who's experiencing some psychic dreams, and it is played by Madeleine McGraw. And I have to say, she really steals the show. Like, she's pretty awesome in this film.
Yep.
She's, that young actress does a great job, and I hear that she's been in quite a bit of stuff. And just a little side note is Scott Derrickson wanted her to be in the film so much that they actually put the production on hold for like 6 months because they wanted to make sure that she was playing this part. And he got, which if anybody knows anything about production, they don't like to do that. So, because she was working on another project. So, and it definitely was worth it. She does a fantastic job in this film.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. So, and I love that, some of the fantastical things that happen between Finney and Gwen uh, by by the assertion that their mother, who we find out has committed suicide, this is before the film starts, that she was going crazy because she was getting psychic dreams and whatnot. So the thought is maybe that it was passed on to the kids. And when we get into the father, we'll go a little bit more in depth into what we think about that. But I really enjoyed not only the fact, her psychic dreams, but I love the way they shot it. If you're a fan of the film Sinister, they're very similar to the Super 8 films that in Sinister, except for they're not gory like those were, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
right.
how did you like the way that they showed her dreams?
Well, it's interesting that, as I was saying before, that this is one of the supernatural aspects that we have in the film. And what I think is even more interesting is, well, not more interesting, but on a similar level interesting, is that in the short story there's actually kind of a bond between the sister and the brother. Like, they can sort of, I don't want to say that they can psychically talk to each other, but they sense each other. There is that sense of, like, she really feels where, like, an empathetic bond that is much stronger than just brother and sister. And they switched that, and I think for good reason here, but it definitely, the prophetic dreams really work here. And also, I keep thinking about this. I've been thinking about it since I saw the movie. Gwen is one of those characters that's like, there's nothing unlikable about Gwen. Um, the character itself is written so well that everything that she experiences and everything that she does, where it could end up being whiny and it could feel like it's disingenuous because it's just kids being kids, it doesn't come off that way at all. Gwen comes off as being, look, I don't understand what this is that I am experiencing. Maybe it's Christian, maybe it's not, maybe it's something else, maybe it's something that maybe I'm crazy, I don't know, but it's all authentic. Like, you really feel her struggle with this, and then that deep desire to help and figure things out. I feel like that was actually a pretty brilliant way of writing this particular character. So I really liked her a lot.
Yes. Yeah, she's a fantastic character. Um, all right, so give me a 1 second. I'm sorry. Uh we're gonna get into, geez, Louise. All right, here we go. Let's talk about Terrence, Finney and Gwen's alcoholic, abusive, widowed father, played by Jeremy Davies, he's just been a really good actor for quite a long time. He's if you're a fan of the show Lost, he had a turn on that show, as well as a lot of films and uh, TV uh, shows and stuff. And I know that there's some stuff that in this film that for a lot of people were hard to watch. With him, he's an alcoholic and, like we said, abusive. And there's a scene where he has a big belt and he's spanking Gwen. And I know there was some people that I watched it with who were just aghast, like, and uh, I can, I can understand where that comes from. I mean, my thing is it's on film, so, the child isn't really getting spanking, but I get how people felt about it. Um, but I feel like his character, I don't want to get into that part because I don't want to spoil anything, um, is very interesting. And he's dealing with loss and grief. He's dealing with these two kids who are very smart, and he has to be a single father, and he has a bad alcohol problem. What is your take on his character?
So, a couple things. First, he Terrence works for a nuclear facility, right? So
Mm-hmm.
clearly, it's got to be pretty high stress. You didn't work for a nuclear facility back in the 70s, and it wasn't high stress. I can say that unequivocally.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, yes, he's a single dad, and yes, on top of that, his wife committed suicide, or at least so we're led to believe. And on top of that, he is, I think personally, I think that he is struggling with the idea that in a similar way that you use the saying, the sins of the father are visited upon the child,
Mm-hmm.
that's what he's thinking, except it's the sins of the mother are visited upon the child. Like, his idea is, nothing can be happening here because if I think or say that this is possible, then I'm saying that that my wife died in a supernatural sort of episode that he doesn't want to believe actually happened, right? So he's, in some ways, I feel like Terrence is trying to protect Gwen. He's just not doing it right. And the other thing, which we even talked about during the film when we were watching it, is oftentimes, and this is true with all the bullying, physical aggression is often the ultimate sign of fear, right? You strike out and try to hurt when you are fearful and don't have any other avenues to portray that to you. Like, he was beyond the point of knowing what to say or how to say it, and physical violence was his only uh I don't know, I don't want to use the word weapon, but it was his only tool to make sure that both, I think well, I don't know about him, but it seems like maybe he was there, on the some end of that too. Um it was the only way for him to make his point. Now, I think honestly, okay, that scene's really hard to watch, and I get why people get traumatized by it. I totally understand. But I think that the point of that scene also was to show us that Finney didn't do anything. Finney stood there. Why did he stand there? Because he was afraid. This is Finney again in our film universe. Here's what's going on, showing himself as being so non confrontational that he cannot even intervene when his sister is getting beat up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's very tough. And but you know what? There is some redemption at some point, which we'll get into as well. So I think this is a good point for us to, because we're going to start talking about it in depth. So I think this is a good point for us to then um, uh, talk spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, this is the point where you might want to check out. But we're gonna get more deeper into it. So um, okay, so give me a second. Okay, so let's talk about this guy right here, and that's El Grabo, the Grabber.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny though. The Grabber is what he's known as.
Right.
And Ethan Hawke does a fantastic job as playing the Grabber in this film. Definitely a role we've never really seen him in before. We've seen him in 2 horror films, but this is the first time where he's the villain in it,
Right.
and he's remarkable in this movie. And which is so funny is because the thing that the senior citizens use to pick up stuff at a distance, it's called the
The
Grabber.
grabber.
Right. So I have one of those here. So now I think of this movie every time when I use my Grabber because I'm a senior citizen. So but okay, so uh the Grabber uh who drives around in this black van and abducts children, and he's going around. He claims to be a magician. Now they live in a small town north Denver. He's running around in broad daylight in this black van, and I'm sitting there like, no one's ever thought to pull this guy over and check out what, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, all these kids are disappearing, and they know what car he's in and all of that, but they know about the black balloons. But I'm like, he's just freely, and he's getting these kids in the daytime.
Right.
He abducts the kids in the daytime, so it's not like he does it so wide open. Like, I'm like, wow, he doesn't like do it in the cut or anything like that. He just abducts them, which I find really interesting that he's been able to be successful doing that. But what is your take on the Grabber?
Well, okay, so I'm going to address that just real quick, okay? Because
Mm-hmm.
you and we have a bit of an age gap between the two of us.
Okay.
And I looked on the very beginning, inside of the intro,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out that one of the kids, the flyer poster, puts his birth date in 1965.
Right.
Okay, so that's not super far away from the year that I was born. A
Okay.
little bit further back, but not too far. Not far enough that I don't remember what it was like to be a kid in that exact era. So I would have been more like Gwen, but still very much remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a different time. And when I say that, I don't mean it was a different time like, we nostalgically go, oh yeah, the times were different. I mean, quintessentially, people thought about things differently. And there were so many, when we look back at it, um, times when kids were taken, or not even kids, but people were taken in broad daylight because we didn't have the same kinds of forensics. We didn't have the same kinds of surveillance that we have now. Because one of my kid actually was the one who said, well, don't you think there would be a security camera out back at that warehouse place? And I was like,
No,
no.
not
There
in
were
the same
no
way.
security cameras back then. There was no that stuff didn't exist. You'd have to be like a high tech facility for that stuff to exist. And th- that that is what allowed this universe to happen, right? The grabber couldn't exist in today's world because
No,
of
because somebody's
course.
ring camera would have caught it.
Exactly. Yes. And somebody would have seen neighborhood watch something. Somebody would have seen the same pattern happening again and again. Now, one thing that I will definitely say, and I think at some point you kind of have to wave your hand and go, okay, this is a movie. Please just recognize that it's a movie and don't be thinking about it in terms of hyper realism. But one of the things that I find super interesting is that the grabbers, I don't know whether I want to call it an obsession or whether I want to call it something else, but the black balloons, I don't think that doesn't feel accidental to me. That feels very purposeful. And I don't mean like maybe it could have been any balloons, but the idea that he uses the same lure each and every time, this is what first clued me into, okay, there's rules to the game. Whatever he's thinking in his head, the grabber has in his head, these are the rules to his game. This is how he does it. And the black balloons are sort of like, this is how I kick it off. This is how it has to be tied in because none of the kids don't experience, at least as far as we know, some of that. And I did find that really interesting. Also, if I could go back, also, well, not go back, but if I could say something about the grabber himself, this character is actually really oddly nebulous. And in this film, it totally works. Normally, your villain really needs to have some fleshing out because otherwise you don't feel like there is impending doom, right? If it just feels random, then we don't have the same vested interest in things. But this film sort of tips that upside down, and the grabber doesn't need to have a super huge backstory because we are securely in Finney's world and we are experiencing everything through Finney's eyes. And the important thing is, what is Finney and what are Gwen doing? That is the important thing. The grabber is almost like a secondary character. It's almost a secondary story in the sense that yes, it's what got Finney in the basement, but him being nebulous sort of works. We don't. In fact, I think it would have been kind of distracting. I don't know. You tell me what you think, but I feel like it would have been distracting if we had too many details about the grabber, because then we would have been paying attention to him instead of to Finney.
No, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I do feel like that that the old grabby, you know, like we see it through his eyes. I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
not him, but we see it through Finn's eyes.
Right.
So, but I don't know. I feel like that's what the charm of the film is. You know what I mean?
Right. There's no, at least for me, we don't need to get deep into who the grabber is in order to be afraid of what is going to happen. And partly, I feel like that also is why the boys calling Finn on the phone matter,
Right.
because they tell him how scary he is. They tell him, no, he took his time and it really hurt, or whatever. Those details matter, because that's what gives us this sense of, oh my god, this is really scary. Like, so clearly we're not in a situation where it's a what if situation, it's a when if situation.
Right. 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 Let's talk about the trope of the phone. Um, so essentially, what happens is Finney is abducted by the grabber, and he's put in a basement. Where only thing there's a mattress. There's a bathroom with no toilet seat, which I hate that. Oh, gross. And there's a phone. If you're watching this, you'll see there's a old rotary phone that's not hooked up. It's disconnected, and he's told by the grabber that the phone doesn't work. But he does cite one time where it rang, and he thought it was what did he say? Electric
Static.
magnets, or static, or
Static.
something.
Yes, right.
But he said nobody was on the phone, of course. So once
Okay,
the phone, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to stop real quick because I just want to make sure that you and I have this discussion at some point during
Hmm.
this about the phone. In the intro, he the grabber says the phone doesn't work and it hasn't since I was a child.
Hmm.
Okay, but that doesn't feel necessarily like it lines up with what we are about to see.
Right.
Right? Does that, did you catch that too? I mean, like
I did catch that. Yeah.
okay. So it could be, and this is what I was thinking, right? It could be that the phone itself is sort of, well, we can talk about that in a bit, but I just wanted to make sure that we had that discussion, because I think for him, for the grabber, there is something kind of odd about his relationship with the phone, not just that he doesn't hear it, or that he can't hear who's on the phone, but that he could also hear it ring,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of it is trauma as well, which they've all gone through.
right?
Well, both Finney and the grabber for sure. So I think that trauma, and then there's the fact that his mother had psychic ability, I'm sure goes to it as well.
Oh, that's a
So,
good point.
right. So I think those things add up to the reason why they both, on some level, hear the phone, you know? And
That is a very good point.
yeah, and one thing I love what they did was they made a point to say that that it was soundproof down there. That he's like, I did it myself. He was very proud of that,
Right.
and so that when the phone does ring, then it lets you know that he can't hear it either. So upstairs, and when he's having these conversations and whatnot, that's Finney, that is. So I really like that. Some people I've seen somewhere where people said they didn't like the whole phone aspect to it, but I'm like, the movie is the black phone. And that's what it's kind of
Yeah,
about.
right?
But just as a aside, I had a story very similar. It had nothing to do with no phone, but I had this idea of someone being taken by a killer, and the um, the ghost of the killer's previous victims band together to help the possible next victim find their way out of it. And so when I saw this film, I was like, no, because it
Oh
was similar
no.
to my idea. But I love this film so much, so maybe it's because it's very similar to an idea that I had. But I didn't do the phone part of it.
So,
But mhm,
there's two things, right? Well, there's three things, but there's two things to think about with the phone. I don't know if you remember Poltergeist 2,
mhm.
where uh, um uh oh my god, the name is just completely blank in my head, but where the girl, her dad picks up the phone
Heather, right?
because Heather, no, her real name is Heather, but in the movie
Oh,
her name is
Ashley. I don't know.
no,
Uh,
it's two words. But anyway,
uh-huh.
so she is talking to her grandmother on the phone, and her grandmother we know is clearly dead.
Mhm.
That was my first sort of experience to, oh my god, there's nobody on the phone, but here it's a toy phone and she's talking to the dead. That's crazy. And then uh a couple of years ago, well, actually maybe 2 years ago, I read the entire Stephen
Carol
King.
Ann.
Carol Ann, thank you. God, I don't know why
Mhm.
I had such a brain malfunction on that one. A couple of years ago, I read Stephen King's short stories called "If It Bleeds," and
Uh-huh.
one of the stories in "If It Bleeds" is Mr. Harrigan's phone. Sorry. And in Mr. Harrigan's phone, it's an actual cell phone, and he sends texts, and apparently the texts are going to a dead person. And so the idea of the phone going to dead people feels like a pretty, like, this is in our conscious, right? We are thinking about this fairly continually. And I was asking someone what they thought about the phone idea, and they said, well, I know a lot of people who will not erase voicemail messages from people that have died. I know a lot of people
Me
who hold
too.
on to their phones because they want to hear their voice, and it's almost like they can hear them from the other side and things like that, which I feel like is actually a really human. That's something that we actually really want. We want to believe that that is something that could possibly happen. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
And Joe Hill should totally sue his dad for ripping off his story.
Right? Too funny. I want to see that court case.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Um. So, uh, one thing that I think is so cool is the help that he's receiving, right, from his dead homies. You know, and one thing they do that is so freaking awesome is that one by one they call him, and the cool, they don't remember who they are, but he's able to
Right.
piece together which victim they are by things that they say, and they tell him to do a task, and the first task doesn't lead to anywhere, and you're like, okay, that was a waste. Like it's like
Right.
and then the next task is a failure, and then all these tasks seem to not really go anywhere, and so at the end it pays off very coolly, because what happens is all these tasks were essential in helping him get away at the end. I mean, we are in the spoiler section. And you find out that they were actually, the first task was to dig a hole in the ground.
Right.
Uh, Let me see if I can find a image of that, to dig this hole and then like to cover it up. So he does that, but it doesn't really lead to anywhere at first. So you're sitting there like, okay, dead man, you didn't help me, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then the next task, told by the paper boy, right there, which I thought this was so good, and it's very reminiscent too of Sinister, the film that Derrickson did before. Uh, he loves dead kids. What is that? What's up with
Yeah.
that? You know, uh, I'm starting to get worried about him. Um, and so all these tasks that the ghost, for lack of a better word, put him on,
There's the
is
window.
yes, and
There's
then
the combination.
the combination and all of that, and we'll get into exactly how it all pays off. But one of the things also, I believe, is the paperboy tells him, because it's seemingly a mistake is made by the grabber where the door is left unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
So Finney is going to go upstairs to see if he can escape, and he gets a phone call, and he's told to don't go up there because it's a trap,
Right.
and he wants to play this game. And I'm a um, let you talk about what you believe about the game, but then we find out that the grabber, which is this is so creepy. This image is there waiting for him with his belt, and it's something about his physique too that looks scary. Like I wonder, is that him? Is that really
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke?
Good
Because his
question.
because his physique looks creepy, with the not wearing the shirt and all of that. And
Good question.
yeah, so what is you had some interesting thoughts about the game aspect of the grabber wants to play.
Well, okay, so first of all, a couple things. One, I feel like we can maybe piece this together a little bit, and maybe it's not what they intended, but
Hmm.
it certainly does make sense. If we if we think about what happened to, okay, Max is the grabber's brother. And if we think about what may have happened between Max and his brother that sort of brought the grabber into this wherever he was in this current mode, maybe this is something that his dad did to him. Maybe
Right.
his dad locked him or him and Max in the basement. And then when they tried to come back up, hit them with the belt. That seems like it would make perfect sense. Now, the the part that I start getting a little bit lost in is, okay, now why does he have to kill them? And what is it about there being five that is like, is that a magic number? Is it, what is happening with that? And I don't know if we can infer anything from it, but that's what I was saying before about it being nebulous. It feels like we could maybe come up with a lot of different theories about why he is doing what he's doing. But one thing is really clear, and that is playing the naughty boy game. And that's the other reason that I think maybe it was his dad, because that language feels very much like what you would use as a child, right?
Hmm.
Um, but the other aspect to it is the mask. And the mask and the amount that he shows his face undergoes several transformations. So at one point, it's the whole mask. And then at some points, it's just the bottom part. And then at other parts, it's something different. This is clearly aren't supposed to know everything that's about this, but I loved that. I felt like that was, he's so fragmented and he has different characteristics of who he is, and they can only be unlayered little bits at a time. I did really like that. And then the second thing is, the game can't work unless the kid takes the bait. And Finney doesn't take the bait at first. He's nice. He's, I wouldn't say he's respectful, but he's not confrontational. And so setting up the whole beginning of the movie for him not to be confrontational gives us lots of time with Finney, because the grabber can't initiate the rules of the game unless he does the thing, which is go up, be seen, and then be chased. And it sounds like, based on what we know, that the last kid to be taken it was only a couple of days, right?
Right.
So he clearly, and we know that he was kind of a go-getter and, I'll charge into danger. So he probably only lived a very short time because he broke the rules, or lived up to the rules of the naughty boy game. And so the grabber killed him pretty quickly. But Finney waited and waited and waited and didn't do anything that would make the grabber initiate that part, right? And then we also see, remember when he says, "Oh, what's your name?" And Finney lies, and he gets
Right.
really upset
Right.
because in his head he was like, "Oh, okay, well maybe you're just never going to play." And that to me felt pivotal. That felt super pivotal.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. I saw the movie 3 times, and until you said it, I didn't even think about that aspect, that because he isn't aggressive like those other kids were, that kept him from getting killed,
Right.
and they're playing a waiting game. And remember, in the beginning, he does tell him nothing is going to happen to you, and then he said something that kind of scared me for a little bit, because I'm like, please, this is not going to be sexual, because he says something, I'm not going to do anything that you wouldn't want, or
Yeah,
something
that you
like
don't
that.
want me to do.
Yeah, and I was like, oh boy, please don't go there. But it really didn't. I just want people to know, because I watched it with some people, and they were like, kind of, wait, is this gonna go? And I said, no, it's no molestation type thing going on. I mean, it might be implied that he might get down like that, but
Right.
there's nothing in the film, and I just want people to know that there's nothing in there where it's expressive, that is what's happening. They never even mention it, but he does say a couple of things that make you think that he might either be thinking about that, or that might be something that he does that they just maybe didn't share with the audience. Because when the one time where he's like, I just want to look at you, uh there was a couple of moments where you're like, oh man. but
Yeah.
um but uh and that's interesting, though, the naughty boy game. And that, but see, though, he has an advantage also, that it's not just his personality, but he has an advantage that he can hear the phone, where the others, because it says the other kids did not. So
Right.
so he's getting some help as well,
I,
you know.
I have a thought about that too, and partly it's what the grabber says. He says it seems like what happens is a whole lot of static builds up all at one time, and
Hmm.
that's what makes the phone ring. But like there's this implication that there has to be a lot of energy in the phone before it can actually begin ringing. And to me, that was, well, there's 4 dead kids, and those 4 dead kids fueled enough energy to power the phone.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
it
so there
might have
might be something
taken
to a static energy
that
thing.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
took that long for enough energy to get built up so that it could be heard. And he, yes, sure, he could, maybe the grabber could have heard it when he was a kid, because maybe his dad did something similar. I mean,
Mm.
it would be super interesting to have and if you're listening, I'm happy to write this screenplay.
Ah,
It would be super interesting to have the backstory of how the grabber became the grabber.
yes,
I would
definitely.
love to know that.
Now, this scene right here, where Finney tries to make an escape, is so good and so thrilling.
Oh, I
And
loved
because
that.
the
Yeah.
grabber is falling asleep, waiting to play the naughty boy game. And Finney gets a phone call that tells him about um the oh, sorry about that, I've got a text, my bad. um about the lock. He knows the combination that's on the door, and
Hmm.
he's able to get it, but he got the numbers, but he didn't know exactly how the numbers went. So which I like that
Right.
too,
Right.
and so while the grabber sleep, um Finney is trying to escape. And I love, like, the way that that scene is shot. And we're gonna pull up a screenshot right there. I love how this is shot, like, you know um with him, just think how close he is to him, waiting there with that belt, you know uh
Yeah.
Someone is
And
at the front porch.
sorry
and
about
not
that, someone's
just,
at my front porch, but talk about it a little bit, okay?
well, not just okay, so lots of things go into
Talk
this.
about it. I'll be right back, I gotta open the door.
Okay. um Lots of things go into this, right? I'm gonna actually step back a second and say, one of the things that surprised me the most was that when Finney gets away, that the grabber doesn't immediately think that that was the engagement that he was looking for. In other words, like, that should have been the end of the game. But why wasn't it the end of the game? And I keep going back to this idea that the rules of the Naughty Boy game must be very, at least solidified in the grabber's head enough that he sort of has to make sure that everything is lined up securely before he can advance to the next section, to the next event that needs to happen. And it seems to me like he does a little bit of mental gymnastics to kind of get from why or where he was when Finn escapes to, oh, okay, well, I don't need to kill you immediately right this very second. But I also, the other thing that I really loved about that is when Finn gets away, um the just sort of like the sheer adrenaline rush that you get by seeing that he escaped is kind of amazing. And it's a really good pause in the movie so that you're not feeling like it is completely hopeless.
Hmm.
And that to me feels very good. Like it was a good use of that little bit of narrative. Not only does it show us that he knows how to get out of the house because now he's got the combination, but it also gave us a chance to breathe, if you will, which I
Yes.
feel like was really important.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting that he changed his mask a little bit too when he left, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
So which is very interesting. And then when he gets caught, you're like, oh no. Like
Yep.
it's like
And the porch light comes on, and then there's like another chance for somebody maybe to, see or open up the door or something. Nope, nothing happens.
yeah, yeah. And you're like, oh, Finney. And then he's now on the naughty boy list, after that. So it's about to escalate. And so there's a character you mentioned, and we didn't give him his real intro. And this actor I like this actor quite a bit. He was on The Wire. He was on a season of this show called Bosch.
Or are we talking about Max?
Yes.
Yeah.
James Ransone, which he's also known as PJ Ransone too. I don't know what the PJ stands for, but he also was in Sinister, and then he was the star of Sinister too. And he plays the most doofus character ever. And this character is in the novel as well too. He's a cokehead, and when I first saw this film, I in my head I'm like, oh, he must be upstairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking like it's more of a secret, that like maybe they're gonna try to reveal it. And then when I saw it the second time, I was like, they really didn't hide it at all. Like that it was him that was upstairs.
Nope, that
Actually,
transition as they come through the floor down to the
right.
basement was like, oh, okay, nope, he's definitely in the house and just doesn't know it. Well,
Right.
and actually,
And obsessed with the case.
right, and somebody else was actually asking me whether or not I thought that Max, first of all, that the reason that he was obsessed with the case was because maybe his dad had done something similar, and that's why he was like totally obsessed with it, like, oh my god, this is happening again. That was it, which would totally make sense with our theory of who the grabber could have been. And then the second, which I feel like is super kind of cool, is Max as a character is so different from who the grabber is that it's hard to imagine that. And I mean, I think he even says it, right? Well, he was my idiot.
Right.
The meaning that Max was the grabber's idiot. I feel like that was actually that was very telling. But that transition through the floor is like, we actually rewound that on
Right.
our on the movie side, because we were like, did we just see that? Was that real? Did that actually just happen? And
Wow.
yep.
Yeah, I was like, when like I said, I thought they were being more, hiding it more. Like it was supposed to be like this big reveal later, even though I figured it out. But then I'm like, no, they didn't really hide it. They pretty much told you
See,
it was him.
and it makes the bait and switch at the end
Hmm.
so much more effective because hey, we already know that here's Max and we already know what's here. And yet at the same time, what do we get? We get a bait and switch where the police are out in front of a house that isn't the right house. It's the one that Gwenny is seeing, but it's not the right house. And that absolutely says kind of everything because I don't know about you, but I was like, "Oh no, did he move? What's going on?"
Right. Well,
I
I'm
love
glad
that.
they didn't. It kind of was like that Silence of the Lambs bit, but
Hmm.
what is so tropey now, like a lot of movies and TV shows have copied it, and I kind of rolled my eyes at first because I was like, don't do the Silence of the Lambs thing. But no, they made it their own. I felt like I thought it was pretty cool how
They
they
did.
how they did it. Um, and so uh, like and then the dog the dog, by the way, I forgot what the dog's name was. Do you remember? No.
Samson,
Samson, yes. I
right?
love it when he goes, Samson, and then he comes downstairs and you look at his dog. He's first of all, it's a beautiful dog. Uh and and then all those things that all the information that he was given from all the victims becomes realized when you realize that he needed all that information to take out the grabber, and
So
I just thought that was so freaking cool.
so there's a trope that this basically mirrors that it copies, right? I'm sure you know what the trope of Chekhov's gun is, right? Well,
No, it's
it, okay, so Chekhov's gun is an item that's been introduced before its use, and it's usually super inconspicuous, and you don't really know why it was introduced, and then it becomes the pivotal plot point behind which your hero or your heroine will base all of their success afterwards. And oftentimes, especially in movies where there's guns involved, that's where it is. You just surreptitiously see that there might be a gun or that there might be something on somebody's, hip or whatever. You don't actually think about it until all of a sudden it comes back into play. My favorite Chekhov's gun is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, where the sheriff gives Maid Marian a knife, and then that ends up being the knife or the dagger that Robin Hood gets to use to kill him in the end. It's that kind of thing. But this is called Chekhov's Armory, right? And in
mm-hmm.
Chekhov's Armory, what you get are a bunch of seemingly intangible or unrelated pieces of information. And then in the end, in order for the hero to succeed, everything has to come together all at one time. And that's how they are able to either kill the bad guy, make their escape, or do whatever the heroic action was at the time.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, they definitely did that.
They did. They did. And they did
They
it
did it
well.
they did it very well. And this scene, I just think is so awesome when he gets his, because he has him there. He has him. He could finish him off, and then when he's able to get his mask off, and he freaks out.
Yep.
Oh man, I mean, I thought that this scene really spoke very deeply about the grabber and the fact that not having the mask on made him act that way. I mean, what do you think about that? What's your take on the way that he acted when the mask was taken from him?
Well, I think this has to do with the rules of the game again. I think this has to do with the rules of the Naughty Boy game, right? Your mask cannot be, you cannot reveal your face because I mean, I would hesitate to speculate on what that actually might mean because I feel like, again, it's super nebulous, but it does feel like it's very much tied to you cannot see my face. If I'm going to kill you, you cannot see me. I have to have some anonymity, even if it's obviously and clearly you know who it is. He's feeling like this exposes him. And also this little moment, this moment where his mask comes off, is also one of those sort of peak horror shout outs where it's in the ninth inning and all the bases are loaded and it really looks like you're going to lose the game. And instead, some huge fumble. Well, that's the now I'm mixing things. Some error happens, and all of a sudden, nope, that's not what it is. And the game gets called. And even though the bases were loaded, and even though it was the ninth inning, the team that wasn't supposed to win wins. That's what this feels like, right? So taking off his mask gives Finn just enough time to do what he needs to do.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you a question. Okay.
Before you ask me that question, I think Michael Myers and Jason are sitting there going, amateur. Amateur. Our mask comes off all the time.
Right?
If you can you just talk a little bit? I gotta say something to somebody real quick.
Yeah. Um. So okay. So hopefully I won't have to repeat this when you get back. But one of the things that I think is like so cool about this particular scene, and what I was going to ask you about, is the fact that he uses the phone's cord. So the black phone has a cord because it's one of those super old phones. And the fact that he uses the cord to strangle the grabber is not just sort of like poetic justice for for the kids that were already killed, but if we go back to the very beginning of the movie when Bruce references his arm, your arm is mint, this is what the point of your arm is mint was all about. There wouldn't be any way that he could strangle him unless he really had that super strong pitching arm. And so everything kind of all comes into place like a crazy jigsaw puzzle that until the very last minute you can't possibly see what the picture is going to be. And that really did feel both purposeful and pretty good. um I gotta say, one of the things that I missed the first time was when he takes the bars off the window. The point of taking the bars off the window, it was never to actually get him to the window. It was to get the bars so that they would come off and then he could put them into the pit, right? Because it's the pit with the bars of the window in it that trap him and basically make him either break his ankle or get stuck. I think he broke his ankle. But that's what keeps him immobile in that spot. And
Uh-huh.
I feel like that was actually pretty genius.
Yeah, no, that was very genius. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you think the whole point of him getting up to the window is to get out of the window, right?
Right.
But no, that was not ever the point. The point was for him to get that grate off the window so that it could get stuck in the pit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I mean, this movie has so many cool aspects of it. And I think that that was really cool. And I think the one last thing I want to talk about is the now when I saw it twice in the theaters,
Mhm.
and the scene, I mean, people were cheering all through the movie at certain parts, but the part where he puts the phone to his ear,
Mhm.
and all of his victims, chide him.
And they all use
Everybody was
their
like,
catchphrase, right? They
yes.
all use the catchphrase that they basically told Finney, but when they
Mhm.
tell it to the grabber, it takes on totally different significance.
Right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a great moment. And the audience, I mean, they were screaming and yelling, and it was really cool. It was very cool. Both times I saw it. So yeah, it was great. Just a terrific film. Um, I really enjoyed it. Uh, Now Joe Hill has pitched a sequel idea, so it'll be interesting what that might be. But I think
I,
this
I hope
stands
the
alone on its
sequel
own.
I hope the sequel is a prequel and not a
Mhm.
Yeah, I really hope that it is, because I feel like that's what we need. I don't actually want to know about somebody copycatting, or that the phone is somehow going to live on. I actually would like to see what happened to the grabber before the grabber was the grabber, and get a little taste of, well, why could he hear the phone when he was a kid? I would
Yes.
love to know that. Um before we close up, I wanted to say, now that we've gotten all the spoiler stuff out of the way, that one of the reasons that I think that this movie was as successful as it was is because it successfully, meaning it thoughtfully, I think, added the kind of tropes in horror that we are very accustomed to, but also sort of turned a lot of it on its head. In a classic horror movie, it's you don't have a happy ending, right? Happy endings are not supposed to be synonymous with the horror genre. Here, we have kids that are definitely they're broken. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But they survived, and there's also redemption for the dad, or at least the possibility of redemption, because he seems to understand that he has taken all the wrong things for granted, and he says so. Um, and and that's different. That's really different. We also don't we definitely don't have the opportunity to see the grabber come back to life, unless he really is some kind of crazy supernatural entity, um because we know he's dead.
Right.
We like, all the things that are kind of standard fare for the ending of a horror movie don't apply here. And part of the reason that they don't apply, and part of the reason that that application actually works here, is because Finn, as the and we see this in the very last scene, it's because Finn has changed. Finn has come full circle, and when he walks into school, he walks confidently. When he is sitting down next to the girl that he really likes, he immediately initiates conversation with her. Like, Finn is a changed person, but he's not changed like, now I'm going to become the grabber. He's changed like, now I recognize I've taken my power. And I love that message. I feel like, and that's what I was saying at the beginning, I feel like that message is sometimes missing in horror, where the protagonist really takes their own power and can do something phenomenal with it by the end of the film. Because I'm not just talking about killing the serial killer. We do see a lot of that. But when you can take something like this and turn it into the manifestation of, okay, the rest of my life is going to be okay, that's big.
Very big.
And I feel like that is, like I said, this is a small niche of horror films, but this one is a perfect representation that needed to be there. So awesome, very good job.
Yeah, I think so. Very well said. All right. So would you recommend people to see this film? You know my
I would
answer.
I would definitely recommend that people see this film, with the caveat that you don't walk into it thinking that it is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as they reference in the film, or that it's, some kind of gore fest, or it's not like that. I mean, there's one scene at the very end with him basically axing his brother in the head. Other than that, it's really not super gore related, and the violence is all extremely implied violence, right? I mean, there's
Right.
some fights and things like that, but it's not over the top. So it's not the kind of movie like House of a Thousand Corpses, or, it's actually, I guess I would kind of think that, yes, this is horror, but it's very much uh in line with a excellently done psychological thriller.
Yep. I concur. How can people get you in social media and all of that good stuff?
Well, you can find me at moviesandmeals.com. Movies make the meal. And you can also find me on my own podcast, you can reference over at Wadco Media. And we are doing currently TV dinners. So we're discussing all kinds of things on TV, related to TV. We've got a whole season all lined up Last week we did video games in the TV series. It's pretty fun. So join us for that if you can.
All right. And you can get me at Kinte F on Twitter, Kinte Ferguson on Instagram. Of course, the website is theindyradio.com. That's the INDY radio.com. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and God bless.
Thanks, Kinte.